For centuries, we've been told a pretty straightforward story about where we come from. It begins with just two people, Adam and Eve. But what if that story is incomplete? What if science, history, and even the biblical text itself, when you look really closely, point to a much more complex and, frankly, a way more fascinating beginning? Okay, let's dive into this because to really understand our own story, we have to go back and meet our most mysterious ancient relatives, the Neanderthals. So right off the bat, you see the problem when you put these two timelines side by side. On one hand, a lot of traditional interpretations say the human story starts with Adam and Eve about 6,000 years ago. But then you look at the fossil record, and it's just undeniable. Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives, were walking the earth for an incredible 400,000 years. The math just doesn't add up. So we're left staring at this huge, almost mind-boggling 390,000-year gap. You can't just ignore that. And it forces us to ask a really crucial question, one that's going to guide our whole investigation today. How can both of these stories, the scientific and the scriptural, possibly fit into one single, cohesive human story? To even begin to solve this puzzle, we have to start with the evidence. And that means we need to get to know the Neanderthals for who they really were, not the grunting, club-wielding cartoons we always see. It's time to look past that classic caveman stereotype and see what the archaeological record actually tells us. From the moment they were discovered, Neanderthals had a serious PR problem. When the first fossils were found in Germany back in 1856, their skulls looked so different that one biologist actually, seriously, proposed naming them Homo stupidus. Can you believe that? And that prejudice really shaped how we saw them for more than 100 years. But here's the first big plot twist. That whole stupid label, it couldn't have been more wrong. On average, Neanderthal brains weren't just the same size as ours, they were actually larger. Now, brain size alone doesn't prove intelligence, of course, but it absolutely shatters that old idea of them as simple-minded brutes. And the evidence of their rich culture just keeps piling up. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. They created these incredibly sophisticated stone tools. They were making abstract art in caves in Spain a full 20,000 years before modern humans even got there. And maybe the most telling thing of all, they showed real empathy. They cared for their sick and injured, and they intentionally buried their dead, sometimes, it seems, even with flowers. If you want a perfect example of this, just look at the case of Shanidar 1, a fossil found in Iraq. This individual had suffered a massive blow to his head that probably left him partially blind. His right arm was amputated. He had a crippled leg, severe arthritis. He was in rough shape. And yet, all of those devastating injuries were healed. There is no way he could have survived on his own. That skeleton is silent, powerful proof that his community cared for him for years. That's compassion. For a long, long time, this was kind of where the story ended, with fossils and artifacts dug out of the ground. But then, in 2010, everything changed. The investigation moved out of the caves and into the genetics lab, and what they found revealed a connection between us and them that is deeply, undeniably personal. So this timeline basically shows where our two stories crashed into each other. You have Neanderthals, well-established across Europe and Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. Then, around 60,000 years ago, our ancestors, Homo sapiens, start migrating out of Africa. For at least 10,000 years, our paths crossed. We didn't just live near them, we met, we interacted, and as you're about to see, we did a whole lot more than that. And here it is, the bombshell. In 2010, the Neanderthal Genome Project proved that if your ancestry comes from anywhere outside of sub-Saharan Africa, you carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA. It's not a theory, it's a fact, written in your own genetic code. They didn't just disappear, in a very, very real way. They live on inside us. So, what does this inner Neanderthal actually do for you? Well, it's not just sitting there. These genes are active. Some of them affect our immune system, helping us fight off certain viruses. They pass down traits related to our skin and hair that gave us better protection against the colder, less sunny climates of Europe and Asia. Think of it like this. Our ancestors got a genetic survival kit from the people who were already living there. Okay, so the science is clear. We're looking at a complex, interconnected human family. But what about the Bible? Can this new understanding possibly work with the Genesis account? Well, surprisingly, when you look closely, the text itself has these subtle clues, little details that have been overlooked for centuries, that suggest the world was a lot more populated than we usually assume.
Let's look at one of the most puzzling parts of early Genesis. After Cain kills his brother Abel, God banishes him, and his first reaction, his immediate fear, isn't about being lonely or starving. It's right here in the text. Whoever finds me will kill me.
And that raises a really obvious but really profound question. Who is he talking about? Who are these others? I mean, if the only people on the entire planet were his parents, Adam and Eve, who was Cain so afraid of? The text doesn't say, but it clearly implies there's a wider population out there, outside the first family. So, where did they come from?
Well, the Bible itself might give us a clue. Genesis actually has two different creation accounts, right back to back. Genesis 1 is like the wide-angle shot, describing God creating humanity male and female, in the plural. Then Genesis 2 zooms in, like a camera focusing on one part of the scene, to tell the personal story of Adam and Eve in the garden. Some scholars think these aren't contradictory at all, but complementary. One is about humanity in general, the other is about a specific, chosen family. So, how do we possibly put all of this together? We've got ancient fossils, cutting-edge genetics, and these subtle clues in ancient texts. It seems we're moving away from a simple, straight line and more towards a tangled, messy human web. Let's look at a model that actually tries to weave all these different threads together. It's called the genealogical Adam and Eve model, and it's basically a way of thinking that says you don't have to choose between science and faith. It proposes that, yes, Adam and Eve were real historical people, but they weren't the only humans on Earth. Instead, they were a pair specially chosen by God from a population that already existed.
Here's how it would work. First, God establishes a special spiritual relationship with Adam and Eve in the garden. After they leave, their kids, like Cain, go out and mix with the people who are already out there, people who could have easily included Neanderthals and other ancient humans. And through intermarriage, generation after generation, their lineage spreads, kind of like a drop of dye in a glass of water, until eventually every single human on Earth becomes a genealogical descendant of Adam and Eve.
So, here's the crucial takeaway from this model. It completely reframes the purpose of the Genesis story. It's no longer about the biological start of our entire species, which is something science can investigate. Instead, it becomes the story of a spiritual start, the beginning of God's special relationship with one line of humanity that would eventually include everyone. And this all leaves us with one last pretty fascinating question to think about. For centuries, we've thought of being made in the image of God as something exclusive to us, Homo sapiens. But if that image isn't defined by our physical shape, but by our capacity for things like creativity, symbolic thought, empathy, community, all the things we've seen evidence for in Neanderthals, then were we really the only ones to bear it? It seems the story of humanity is far richer and way more mysterious than we ever imagined.